Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're seeing my face for the very first time, hi, welcome. My name is Adora and you're watching Life with Adabekee. If this is your very first time here, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Let me know in the comments what made you click, how you find my video and all of that, if you're an OG, welcome back. If you're a returner, welcome back. I hope you've subscribed. And, thank you guys so much. I hope you were able to watch some of my previous videos that I did in Nashville with my friend Ioma. If you haven't watched those videos, please be sure to go back and watch them. Let me know what you think about them in the comments. We had some funny ones. We had some serious ones. We had vlogs. So, we gave you people a lot of variety. But let's get on to the video of today. In July, and we're definitely in the heat of the application season of the new app cycle. So if you're one of the people who is applying this cycle, I wish you good luck, and that's why I'm trying to give you some nuggets here and there. So collect. This video is going to be in two parts. So the first part, I'm going to talk about some of the common secondary application questions that you're going to see for a lot of the schools and how I feel you can go about answering them. So that's what this video is about. I'm just giving advice. You can take it, you can leave it, but I feel like, a lot of people are like, how do I even approach answering this question? And I want to be able to talk about that in this video. And then the other video, which is going to be the part 2 of this, which you should watch when it comes out. So on my notification bell is going to be about things I think you should be doing now to prep for the secondary wave. Okay, so I'll talk a bit more about that in the other video. So today's video is just going to be some common questions. Like, let me say 80% of schools are going to ask you at least one of these questions, and you should be prepared. At least you should have a game plan of how to answer it. So this video, I'm just going to give you a strategy. I'm going to give you a game plan of how I think you should approach these questions and how to think like the outcomes, how to, answer the question, how the outcomes are thinking, what the outcomes are thinking about when they ask you these questions, and how you can go about answering it and personalizing it to your own. The first question you might encounter is, tell me about yourself. If you don't encounter this one in the secondaries, you will definitely encounter it in an interview. It is like the ultimate interview question. It's, just tell me about yourself. And a lot of people are very, very scared. What am I supposed to say? How should I answer this? So for me, I like to answer this question by first starting, personal family background. I'll tell you that I'm the first of 6, I'm the Ada, the first daughter. And I tell you a little bit about my journey that I immigrated to the US and, I'm from Nigeria. I might add a little bit about my educational background, but in your med school journey, you might not need to add that. But in the interview, in the secondary, you might not need to add that. But in the interview part, it might be, nice to say, oh, I went to this school, I've lived here. So I recommend starting that question by answering a little bit about your own personal background. Then you can talk about, a little bit about your journey to medicine. Then you can say, I have done XYZ, I became interested in medicine because of XYZ, and then if it's an interview question, you can end it by saying, I would really like to come to this school because of XYZ. So do you see how even though they're asking you, tell me about yourself, you stylishly, included medicine there without being overbearing, but you've also answered questions about yourself. The interviewer knows your background. They now know why you're interested in medicine and why you want to come to their school. Yeah, so this question can also be framed in why medicine, but I think why medicine ends up being answered in your personal statement. But if you're ever asked to tell about yourself, you always want to start by actually talking about, I think people forget their family background. Like they forget, like, you know, their actual personal history, or if they, like, if you've done something, if there's something that you're passionate about, if there's something that you're interested in. Like me, I would say I'm a YouTuber, you know. If there's something like that, add it. It's part of yourself. Be sure to showcase that. So that's like one of the common questions. Another question you get is, why this school? Why do you want to come here? That question, if you don't see it in like at least 10 schools, call me something else. But you will get that question a lot. Why do you want to come to our school? I suggest picking 2 to 3 reasons, concrete reasons, not generic. Oh, your school is, you know, your school has this, or you're a great school. Most schools, they know they are great. But if it requires you going to their website, if it requires you talking to a current student or an alumni of the school that you might know, go there and pick 2 to 3 concrete things that are like that school specific. Is it something about their curriculum? Like my school has like this learn curriculum, which is in phases. And if that's something that sparks your interest, talk about it when the school asks you why this school. Me, my school has a free clinic, a student-run free clinic, and I complete, that's something I'm passionate about, you know, serving marginalized communities, and that was something the clinic was doing. So I mentioned it in my why this school, because that's something specific about the school. If a school is like a, you know, works with communities, if a school is, I know there's one school, Iowa Carver, they're like very like bioengineering focused. You can talk about that, but pick 2 to 3 concrete things specifically about. Don't be generic about that question, because the school will know, adcoms will know that you're being generic. They will know that you didn't even do the research to even find out what it is about their school. So they're asking you that question to kind of figure out, have you even done the research to know what our school even offers, right? So you don't want to be found one. Another common question that you find is the strengths and weaknesses question. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? First of all, you have to realize, why is the adcom asking me this question? They're asking you this question because they want to see, one, like, do you recognize what you bring to the table, your strengths? What do you bring to the table? 2, are you reflective enough to know where you can improve? You understand? So when they ask you for your weaknesses, don't go and say I do drugs or something. I beg. Please don't go and say I do drugs or like some. No, like actually talk about a weakness that can be spun around. So let me give an example. If you ask me about my strength, I might say like I'm organized, you know, I'm a great team player. I like to, you know, I'm good with working in groups and all of that. That's a good strength. You can talk about an example of how you've worked in groups. But if you ask me about my weaknesses, I might talk about how like I find it very difficult to say no. But I have been working on, you know, establishing both professional and personal boundaries so that I don't feel overwhelmed. Do you see how I've taken this weakness now and spun it around? I spun it around. And I have, you know, giving you, it shows that I have reflected on that weakness and that I'm doing something about it. You understand? So when they ask you that question, all the questions require you to have some kind of like reflection, to think deep. But when you think deep about it, don't just write about the weakness. Write about what you're doing also, you know. What are you doing to spin that weakness around? What are you doing to be better, to improve yourself? Because at the end of the day, that's what they want to see. They want to see that you are doing something to make your life better. And that question they ask is like, tell me about a time that you have, you know, had a challenge and you overcome it. This question is so difficult because you're like, first of all, you're like, what is adversity? Have I ever faced adversity? Okay, if I have, like, am I comfortably not sharing? So like, if you're comfortably not sharing like about something traumatic, sure, go ahead. But it doesn't have to be something like traumatic, right? It really doesn't have to be. For me, when I was asked this question, I shared about like, you know, migrating to this country at 16 and not knowing anything, like, or not necessarily not knowing anything, but like being very, very confused. Like there are a lot of things that it was just not working. Like I talked about how, like, and I gave example, like in my chem class, my general chemistry class, like in Nigeria, we're taught like the IUPAC's naming standard. So like CO2, we will call it carbon 4 oxide. But here in America, they call it they still go by like the former one. So they will still call it carbon dioxide. So in all these like my assignments, right, I would write carbon 4 oxide, like potassium 2, this and that one, but it would fail me. Like I would get all the questions wrong, even that wasn't wrong. I would get all, and it was very frustrating. Like I didn't know what to do and everything. So I talked about how like that was just one of the examples of, you know, adversity I faced. Like I would answer questions in class and everybody be looking at me like, this girl, what are you saying? Like my accent, I wouldn't be understood. And like something like that, like I talked about how I was able to go to my professor and have office hours with him, sit down with him and like go step by step, like, okay, how can I make sure that I'm not, even though I understand what I'm doing, but how can I make sure that it's making sense in this American's context? So when they ask you about adversity, they want to see that, one, that you struggle, because medical school is a struggle. So they don't want your first time to ever struggle be in medical school. They want to see that you have coping skills. That's actually why they ask that question. They want to see and know that you have coping skills. That when stuff gets rough, that you have a strategy to approach hard work. You understand? Like they want to see that when the going gets tough, you have what it gets to, you know, for the tough to get going. So that's why they ask that question. Another question that they ask is diversity, like, how do you plan to improve like the diversity? You know, what kind of diversity? All the diversity questions, they come in like different ways. So I think a lot of time when people think about, like, when people get that diversity question, their first thought is like, oh my God, race, ethnicity, like that's where they first go to, gender. And I won't lie, those are like the most common things and usually the most common straws to grasp at. But I challenge you to think of like times in your life when you've had to either work with or live with or, you know, interact with people who are different from you. Because at the end of the day, that's really what they're asking. Like, how have you worked with people who are different from you and what have you gained from that experience? You understand? For some people, it's working with maybe a homeless population. Like, you've never had that experience before and working there, you learned XYZ. So those questions really call for you to reflect on working with people who are different from you, because in medicine, as a physician, you will come across people from all walks of life, and the school wants to make sure that like you have been able to work with people who are different from you, or at least that you just have at least strategies, or that you know how to interact with people who are different. You understand? Who are different from you. You know how to interact with diverse populations, whether that's disabled populations like different gender, different race, ethnicities, nationalities, language, any immigrant population. So I'll say dig deep. Sometimes like people are like, I've not actually interacted, I've not worked, but maybe you've had a roommate before that was, you know, like a different origin. So how was that interaction? Like, how did you interact? What did you learn from that situation? So that's really what they are calling up on you to reflect on and answer in a lot of those diversity questions. So don't be so scared that, oh my God, they're asking me like about race or ethnicity. It's not always about that. You can dig deep. You can dig deep, okay? So another question, this one is really for my non-tras. They might ask you like gap years. So I say go simple, just tell them what you've done. Like just say, like for me, I was like, oh, I did my master's, and in my master's I did this, I did that, and I learned this. And then I talked about like working, I worked for XY, you know, I worked here and I did that. So those gap year questions, like don't stress too much about it. Like just say what you did. I hope you did something. Just say what you did. Like it doesn't need to be too deep, but just say what you did in your This is my final thing to add is sometimes they ask you, use this space to add anything else that you feel like you want the admission committee to know that you have not mentioned before. Hold on. Before you use that space, make sure that you actually have something to add. Don't just add for addition's sake. Okay? Don't just put, because you have to realize these people are viewing maybe 3,000 to 7,000 med school applications. Don't give them extra work unless necessary. This is not the place to say, oh, my GPA is 3.5. This is what, bro. Unless you have like significant deficiency, unless there is really, really something that you're like burning to tell the outcomes that you feel like will be a game changer in your application, just skip that. Like, don't be afraid to skip it. I think some people feel like, oh my god, if I skip it, it makes me look unserious. No. The person that is unserious is the person that decided to answer something that they've not asked them. Okay, so thank you guys so much for listening to me, for watching this video. So like I said, this is the part 1. The part 2 will be coming out soon after this video. And just thank you so much. Please watch this video to the end. If you got this far, it means you've watched it almost the end. I was featured on a podcast. I'm going to link the podcast in the description box. This podcast, they featured me, and I was able to talk about my journey. It's a Premed podcast, so like I said, the podcast to be the link to that particular episode will be in my description box. But you guys, thank you so much for watching. Continue to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in my next video, which is the part 2 of this video. Okay, bye bye.